But what did I learn? Oh my goodness. I learned how to avoid a knife attack. I had a knife pulled on me because somebody was so angry with the council. I learned what happens when you find a dead body in a house. I learned how to evict squatters from the property they shouldn't be in. I learned how to take someone to court, even a family, and have them evicted because they just weren't paying their rent. That broke my heart to this day. It makes me feel horrible. I also learned how to stand up for myself because I was me and one other woman in an office of 35 men. So we're talking back in the late 70s, early 80s, very sexist environment. So I had to stand up for myself. I learned to be sarcastic. That was a tool that I honed and sharpened.
Gill, tell us, at what stage in your life did you find yourself? What relationship broke you to discover yourself?
What relationship brought me? Do you know what? I've been blessed by having a lot of people in different places along my lifetime. And I think most people can acknowledge the teacher that was pivotal in their life in the early years. But I would say the main person that's been my rock is a nice young man I met when I was 14 and he was 18. And when I was 21, we got married. And we've been married ever since. And he's seen me through thick and thin, all the ups and downs of life. And we celebrated 39 years married life this year. So he's the main pivotal person in my life for sure, my husband. But so many others, so many that have been not necessarily great relationships that have taught me the most. People that I've struggled with, people that have surprised me, and I'm like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. And I've had to learn what was it about me that triggered that in them, and what was it about them that got them triggered. So I've done a lot of work over the years on finding me, working out why I'm here, working out what my purpose is and what my, what my specialist skills and my genius. We call it in my little community, your genius. Everyone has a genius. It's just we don't always know what it is yet. So we spend some time exploring what that could be. And once you kind of cotton on that, yeah, I can do that. And some people can also do that, but mostly I'm pretty good at that. And that's my special source for what I do for my clients, for people around me. And once I kind of cottoned onto that, and other people were telling me that, and people that sometimes were strangers that were telling me that, like, okay, that must be right. So I think, when did I find myself? Probably most over the last 15 years, where I've kind of had that journey of exploration, going on various courses. But you know what? I think I knew when I was 4 years of age what I was going to do. And the journey has been winding, but I've got there in the end.
And what was your childhood like? What was your relationship like with your parents?
My dad, I adored. We were thick as thieves. He was a docker, so we never had a huge amount of money when we were kids. But he taught me that wealth is a mindset. He didn't teach it to me on purpose. It kind of evolved, but I never got the impression from him that money was an issue. Dad, can we go on holiday? Yeah, we'll find a way. And that holiday might have been going to my aunt's house because she was on holiday and her house was not that far from the sea. So we'll go and stay there while she's on holiday. We had a holiday. It wasn't the best holiday in the world. All my peers were going abroad at that point, but we still had a holiday. So my dad's wealth was the state of mind of, you have a roof over your head, you have food in your belly, you have loving people around you, we're wealthy, that's it. So it wasn't until much later that I look back and see my life going, oh, we were actually quite poor. Looking at the food that we ate, looking at the fact that we didn't have any mod cons. We didn't have a telephone till I was about 15. We didn't have hot water until I was 8. We didn't have an inside toilet till I was 11. We never had a colour TV when I lived at home. We never had central heating until I installed it in my first house that I bought with my then boyfriend, now husband. So we never had money growing up, but I was taught from my dad this essence of, we're very blessed, we're wealthy in lots of different things. My mum was a seamstress and taught me how to make, do, amend, literally. So we were taught how to sew buttons on, darn socks, make clothes, and it was about saving money. Ironically, how much it's come full circle, because we used to mock her for, oh, for goodness sake, surely we can go out and buy a new outfit. I didn't have any bought clothes for me until I was 13 years of age. Even my coats, every jumper, everything was handmade, because that was the cheapest way of doing it in those days. And I just wanted to go out and buy something off the shelf. But I got there in the end. So my mum was very practical, very strong-willed, very roll your sleeves up and get on with it. Deal with it yourself. Don't ask anyone for help. For goodness sake, get on with it. So she taught me the ethic of hard work. And my dad taught me this abundant mindset, which I still have today. I've had to override my mum's teaching, because sometimes you have to ask for help. It's not a bad thing. It actually connects you much more to people when you ask for help. And I'm still learning that, to be fair. But I had a lovely childhood. I had an older sister, 5 years older. Not the best of relationships, but we cared for each other in our own sweet way. So although on paper I had a tough upbringing from the wealth side of things, no money, in reality I had everything that I needed, and I was very blessed.
What you're saying there effectively is you grew up in a loving home, even though your parents didn't have much in the way of finance or money. They instilled in you, to show initiative and look after yourself, which is very important in life, and never to be afraid to assert yourself either, which I think is a very, very important skill set to develop for the rest of our lives. Mm-hmm. So moving along here, obviously you went to school. What was your school life like? And did you make and lose friends easily in school?
I collected people. When I was 6, I remember taking some friends home for tea. My mum said I could have some friends home for tea. This is the East End of London. And I remember after they'd gone home, my mum said to me, don't you have any white friends? And I remember going, what do you mean white? White. What do you mean white friends? And she said, the skin, white. And it's like, oh, and it was this penny dropping, we're different. What's the problem with that? White doesn't matter. And I'm like, no, I don't have any white friends. And then I started to think, white. I said, no, it's fine. It's okay. But she was asking that question. And there was that ignorant racism that was going on at that time. Bearing in mind, we lived in a multicultural area where I was brought up. And I look back on those days now, and I was blessed to be in that environment. But I always wanted people to be friends, wanted people, you go play with you go and have fun. Or what, you're on your own, come and play with us. I always wanted to bring people into the fold. And I still, this weekend just gone, I was spending the whole weekend with my friend that I've known since I was 11 years of age. I collect people, and if they stick, I don't let them go. So I was very blessed. My senior school was a bit scary. That had all the bullies. Therefore, the bullies would bully someone in another class because I was one of them, if you see what I mean. So yeah. I was protected because there was a competition or kind of a rivalry amongst the classes. We were known as the naughtiest class in school. Some of the girls were very, very proactive and empowered, shall we say. But because I was in their class, I was okay. So I didn't have to worry about having my head shoved down the toilet or being locked out on the roof overnight, things like that. So it was a scary place to be. I didn't particularly enjoy it. Teachers were not fantastic, but looking back, it could have been so much worse.
I certainly enjoyed my time in primary school too, here in Ireland, but I found secondary school initially a bit daunting because I was a year too young for my class. And effectively what I had to do then was to stay back a year in second year to catch up with the age group I should have been at. So I spent 6 years in post-primary school rather than 5 years. But it was probably the better decision in the longer term because there's no point going to university or to third level education if you're too young, because it only catches up with you eventually. So obviously after secondary school or GCSEs or O-levels, whatever you did at the time, you moved into the workplace. How did you manage the transition from school life to the workplace? And did you bring life skills you learned at home and in school into the workplace with you?
It was scary. It was very scary. It wasn't a good transition. It wasn't a good transition at all. I ended up working for the Greater London Council, first in the Legal and Parliamentary Department, which I hated, and then in the Housing Department at 16 years of age. Didn't want to go on. I knew I didn't want to stay on at school. Been there, done that. Not going to carry on, thank you, even though I was told I should do. And then I went to work in the Housing Department and very quickly got promoted. And it's interesting, isn't it, how just because you can do something and you're good at it, people think you enjoy it. And I didn't enjoy any of it, but I just went for promotions and got promotions because I didn't like doing what I was doing. So I was moving away from the stuff I didn't like, quite often into something from the frying pan into the fire. So I became, by the age of about 19, an estate officer. So I was responsible for looking after in excess of 600 council tenants, which at that age is ridiculous when I look back now. It was crazy. But what did I learn? Oh my goodness. I learned how to avoid a knife attack. I had a knife pulled on me because somebody was so angry with the council. I learned what happens when you find a dead body in a house. I learned how to evict squatters from a property they shouldn't be in. I learned how to take someone to court, even a family, and have them evicted because they just weren't paying their rent. That broke my heart to this day. It makes me feel horrible. I also learned how to stand up for myself because I was me and one other woman in an office of 35 men. So we're talking back in the late 70s, early 80s, very sexist environment. So I had to stand up for myself. I learned to be sarcastic. That was a tool that I honed and sharpened. To the extent that I made a man cry with my sarcasm. Didn't have to lay a finger and didn't punch him, but I brought him down to size. And I'm not proud of that. But that was how I defended myself. And it took me years to not be that person because I was quite sharp and wicked. And some people would laugh and think it was funny, but it was just my defense mechanism. I learned how to get on with people. That's what I learned in 10 years in local government. So I went from there to Brentwood District Council, to Hertford District Council, East Herts District Council. And it was like different environments entirely, but it was all people. So that's what I realized is it's a people place. There, and you could go to work and you would never please everyone because either the council tenant was upset with you, or your manager was upset with you, or a councillor was upset with you, or an MP was up. You couldn't please, you'd please one and the other three were unhappy. So it was a lose-lose situation all the time. And when I got an opportunity to leave, took it, grabbed it with both hands, because it was just, you could feel yourself emotionally, mentally going down, down, down. It just wasn't working. And I just feel for those people now that are in those jobs because you can't win. There's never enough budget. Everybody wants more and they want to give it their best shot. So I've been accused of all sorts of things that I didn't do. That was just them retaliating and trying to feel like they're being heard, basically. So I did learn an awful lot about communication skills, about people skills, and about listening, because sometimes that's all people wanted to do, was have their rant so that somebody heard them and not just going, yep, yep, yep. It was about showing that you'd heard about their pain and supporting them through that. And I think that's part of what I do today, is help people to understand their pain and their upset and get it off their chest, and also to see where it's come from and to dissipate it so they don't have to deal with it again. So yeah, those years at work, as opposed to being self-employed and being a business coach, was gold mine. I just wish I'd realized that every day was a learning opportunity rather than another day, another dollar. I've got to go through this again.
I think what you're saying there, Gill, is that you found yourself in a situation where you had to grow up very quickly because you were handling tenancy issues at 19 years of age. You were still quite raw, and that forced you to develop life skills, to develop communication skills. And you just mentioned there a minute ago about the fact that working in the council housing department resulted in you having to develop your listening skills. And it's often said we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them in that proportion, that it's better to listen more and talk less. And that's how we develop our empathy skills. So I think you developed quite well in that job. Well done to you. So in terms of, you married at 21 years of age, and you had your own family, were you determined, along with your husband, to provide a better life for your children than you experienced yourself growing up in East London?
Yeah, we had probably our first row was over just that. On a Saturday afternoon, there was a show home I said, can we go and look at the show home, just to kind of get some ideas if we ever decide we're going to live together or whatever. So we were both working for local authority at the time, and we had a look around this show home that we knew, we couldn't afford at the time. It was beautiful. I think it was worth about 200,000 back then. So probably equivalent of about $1 million today. Long time ago. And we looked around, and when we came out, I was like, wow, when do you think we could have a house like that? And he laughed at me. And I'm like, why are you laughing? He said, we can never afford a house like that. That's ridiculous. It's nice to go around and have a look, but we never afford that. I'm like, why not? And he went all logical on me. He went practical. This is your salary, and this is my salary, and this is what you need for a mortgage, and this is what we need for deposit, and this is how much our repayments will be. We cannot afford it. I said, well, we need to leave our jobs then, don't we? And he was like, no, what are you talking about? And then it escalated into a huge row. We didn't row then. And it was this kind of first proper row, which was about a hypothetical house that we weren't actually going to buy. But the idea that we would never, we would never afford that? What is wrong with you? It just didn't feel right. And it was a wake up time for me, because I was like, so what do we do if this salary is never going to be enough? Even if I'm promoted 3 times, it's never going to be enough to afford that. And the wheels started churning. I was like, okay, right, let's have a look then. Because I'm not going to live in the house that I'm living in at the moment forever. It was a lovely house, by the way. Our first house was really sweet, really cute, tiny little terrace house. But it's like, no way am I going to live in that house. Ironically, the house we live in now is probably twice the size of that one. So we got there pretty damn quick, but it took both of us becoming self-employed and running our own businesses to get there. And now if I ever go back past that road where the houses are, I'm so glad I don't have that house. I would not have wanted it anyway. So it's funny how it goes on. But it was my kind of shock of like, why don't you want the same things I want? That was weird. So that was when I realized that I had to get him on board to where I was at. Everything's possible. Of course you can do it. You want to go to the moon? Let's go to the moon. I'm going to go to the moon. Well, and I couldn't see how he had this like, oh, don't be ridiculous. Don't tell me it's not possible. I'll show you it's possible. And again, it was my mum's upbringing. It's like, roll your sleeves up. Let's make it possible. Come on, let's do that. And that's the way so within about 6 months, he had a sales job, and I was holding the fort down with my salary. And then a few months after that, I'd left as well.
So what was the transition like for you from employment into self-employment? Did you embrace the challenge of starting your own business, or did you have to make ends meet for a while and kind of cut back on the luxuries in life?
Oh, did we have to cut back, John? Did we have to cut back? It was exciting in the beginning, and the money flowed. We're talking 1987, 1988, that time. It was good. If the 80s, you kind of set your sight on something, and the money did flow. And then we had a bit of a mishap. So we had a stationery company at that point, office supplies, and the unit next door to us, the industrial unit, had a fire, and that fire damaged all the paper and stock that we had. And we were like, oh, what can we do? So we'd already borrowed money to get the stock, so we had minus money to get it going, and now we had no stock to sell. And at one point it was like, this is it, we've got to give up, this is too much. On the other hand, it was a blessing in disguise, because after about a month the insurance money came through, and that was perfect cash flow for us. So we were able to salvage some of the stock and obviously sell it at a lesser price, but it was still okay. It just had that dirt and that little bit of a burnt smell going on. But that actually helped us. And then once we were there, it just kind of flowed, and we were jogging along. And we've had, we've been through 3 recessions now. Thank you very much. But we've always had each other. So even when we had a lot of debt, when somebody had done the dirty on us, we had a business partner in the early days, and he just disappeared with a lot of debt that he'd racked up, and we had to pay that all back. We chose to pay it all back. We could have gone bankrupt. We could have gone into liquidation, and we chose to pay it back. It was tough. So we went probably maybe 2.5 years of hand to mouth. We didn't buy branded products. We didn't buy clothes at all. But you know what? You had a wardrobe full of clothes. It just meant, you know, if you had a pair of knickers with a hole in, you'd sew them up. You know, make do amend, like my mother taught me. We had a car in the garage that was a leasehold car, but we couldn't afford to put petrol in it for about a year. So that stayed in the garage, but we still had to make the payments. Lots of things that, you know, holiday, no. Oh, why didn't you come out for dinner? We can't afford it. Oh, well, we'll get a takeaway. We can't afford it. So we went, no meals out. But you know what? We didn't do the cinema, theatre, meals out, takeaways. Everything was just to the bone. But we learned, again, another learning experience. All you need is what's free anyway. We had each other. We had a roof over our head, and we just about had food in our belly. And we went for walks in the park. We had friends over, and they would bring some stuff with them, or we go to their house and they'd feed us for a little bit. You know, we had good friends that looked after us, and we got to see who our real friends were. And we got to realize that the stuff you spend money on, like a nice outfit or a nice haircut or all those sorts of things, weren't important at all. And I still don't need them. I still don't need to have fancy nail varnish or any of the things that are necessary, because I know what it feels like to go so long without them. It doesn't mean to say, and I can have them now, but I choose, they're not really that important to me. But what's important are the people. So when the pandemic came and everyone's realizing it's the people in your life that are important, I was like, yeah, obviously. Just miss them a bit more when you can't see them. But yeah, we've had ups and downs. We've had ups and downs, but we are blessed because we've always come out the other end. And I know some people don't, and they crash, and it is agony to go through all of that. But we just kept our heads down and worked really hard and got through it.
I do remember going to England in the late 80s myself, and I went over, it was 88, and shortly afterwards, inflation was starting to take effect in the economy over there in the UK, and interest rates started to go up. And I do remember that there was a housing boom in the late 80s in the UK, particularly in the Greater London area and out into the home counties. And then the increases in interest rates had a dampening effect on house prices. And then in the early 90s, with the change of Prime Minister from Margaret Thatcher to John Major, around that time, you had the introduction of council tax, of course. Then you had a fall in house prices. And then effectively, the UK left the European rate mechanism in the early 90s under John Major. I think it was Nigel Lamont. I think he was Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time. And then interest rates started to fall after that. And then there was a gradual recovery in the UK economy. I do remember that all right. Yeah. But I do remember going up, say, to about 1996. House prices started to recover around that time. And what you had then effectively was where people were selling a house, interest rates were relatively cheap. So let's say I offered you 150,000 for your house. You accepted the offer. 2 or 3 weeks later, somebody else came along and said, I'll offer you 175,000. People were being gazumped. Yeah, I remember that happening all right in the UK. Yeah. In terms of, your family, what did you have, along with your husband, did you have aspirations for your children to go to university, to go to third level, to get good careers, good jobs for your children?
I guess so. None of my family had ever been to university. I went belatedly when my children were teenagers. My philosophy being I wanted to be a good example to them. So if they wanted to go to university, they go, oh, mum's done that, so it can't be that difficult, can it? They both went to university. We've got 2 daughters. But it was a case of you don't have to go, but if you fancy it, it's a good life experience. You get to look after yourself, but don't go just to have fun. Go and get a decent degree. I don't want you coming back with a second-rate degree and you've kind of wasted all that effort. So that was basically what they did. So one was English and the other one got English and history. One was history, sorry, and the other one got English and history. and they both got 2-1s. And they both got relatively good jobs as a result of it. But I'm very much aware, I think, that it's not necessarily the piece of paper that you get, but the people that you connect with when you're at university. So I know my eldest definitely got a job. She tilted towards the job because she'd gone to Exeter University. Oh, I went to Exeter as well. Oh, that's lovely, said the person interviewing her. That was interesting. So yeah, my other daughter went to Leicester University. So they both have good connections with people across the world now as a result of the people that they met there. But if they hadn't wanted to go, that would be fine. I want them to do something they enjoy, not something they have to endure. And I'm very much aware that my first 10 years from 16 to 26, I endured the job. I really did not enjoy it. Yes, I was good. Yes, I got promoted. Yes, I got paid a lot. Doesn't matter. I really wasn't having fun. And yet I still collected some friends from that time who I'm still friends with now. But that's the only saving grace in those 10 years was those friends that I made along the way. So for my daughters, from day one, when they went to play school, all I've wanted for them was to make a friend. And wherever you are and whatever you're doing, if you're at school and you've got a rubbish teacher, if you've got a friend in the class, you can cope with it. If you go to university and one of the people in your halls of residence are horrible to you, if you've got other friends, then you can get through. If you go to work and you're not enjoying the work, but you've got a friend, you can get through. So it's like, that's all I've ever wished for them. So every time they come back after the first day of something, I'm like, did you make a friend? I'm like, yes, Mum, I made a friend. Okay, good. And they collect people as well now. So it's following on in that generation, where my mother was the total opposite. What's the point of having friends? They'll only let you down. It's like, really, Mum? It's not like that. And I think that's where she had been embittered and saddened by friendships that didn't work out. And now you can look back on her lifestyle and see why. But for my kids, all I want is for them to be happy. That's what I ask them. If I haven't seen them for a little while, I look in their face, hold their face in my hands and go, are you happy? Yes, I'm happy. My job is done. That's all I need.
I think that's a great way to look at being a parent, to be quite honest, because there's nothing worse than insisting to your children that they should go to university, because effectively all you're doing is living your life through your children. And if your children, anticipate that, they might slack off. Whereas your two daughters went to university with a positive outlook, not just to get a good grade. Both of them got 2-1s, I understand, but they also made good friends. In other words, they worked hard, but they also enjoy themselves at the same time in university, and they're probably applying themselves to the same way in their professional life and personal lives nowadays. So asking another question here, Gill, looking back at your past, what circumstances would you consider as character building blocks that shaped you to become the person you are today?
Well, probably losing that first business, that was a knock, and that was tough. And whilst we coped with not having money, don't get me wrong, I didn't like it, but I wasn't going to let it get me down. So that's probably one that always stays with me. Another one that always makes me grateful is my best friend's son at the age of 22 was killed crossing the road. And this was basically the son I never had, in as much as their family lived around the corner to us as they were growing up. There were 3 children there. We had 2. We would eat meals probably twice a week together. All the kids went to the same school. We had holidays together. We were just an extended family. So it was a huge shock when he went. And then 9 months later, his sister was crossing the road and got knocked down. And she survived, but it was touch and go for a long time, and she had brain damage. And the fact that she's walking and employed today is a miracle. So I look at that family and my friend and how she endured it. And I said to her at one point, when the emotion and it overwhelmed me, and we were walking to see her daughter in hospital for the umpteenth time, and she was very practical and she was getting on with it. And I said, oh, I just don't know how you do it. And she stopped in her tracks and she looked at me and she went, I don't have a choice, and you would do exactly the same. So, right. Yes, you're right. Let's get on with it. How dare I kind of feel for myself when she's the one that's going through the agony, but she daren't think about it because then she couldn't function. She couldn't put one foot in front of the other. So that whole time, and then to explain to my children who were adults but were still my kids that their next thing to a brother was no longer there, and that was agony as well, to have to go through that. So that kind of pain made me realize even more that it's the people that matter in this world, and make the most of them, and don't put off, don't have around, not talk to somebody just because they said this and she said that and he said that, and just get over it, just sort it out and get it done. Life is far too precious to worry about those kind of conversations, and be humble and go and ask for, well, can we make this work? And even if we agree to disagree, can we be friends again? And I've had those conversations with friends, but that losing Matt was, it still hurts now. It's not going to go away, that feeling, but what a learning curve, that you become stronger because you have to be for your friends in order to help them function in any way, shape or form. So that's a big signpost in that, and helping my daughters through it as well. I mean, sadly, that wasn't the first death that they had to deal with. My youngest had, one of her school friends had died. Another was both of them were at a drama club, and one of the guys in the drama club had been killed in a car crash. This was all relatively close together. It was scary, and they had to deal with all of that. And so you kind of realize how resilient your own children are after a while, and they get on with it. But sometimes that damage can be there and you don't always see it, and you have to find it later and help them again when it comes back. And it comes back. It takes more than one dealing with to cope with things like that, I think. But yeah, those are the two areas that I would
I guess what you're saying there, Gill, is that in the case of your friend, when her son was killed crossing the road, you decided it's best to be there to listen to that person, to empathize, to listen actively to that person and what they're going through. And similarly, when you're with your two daughters, when their friends were killed for whatever reason, you decided it's best to listen to my daughters and their concerns, and to try and coach them along the way as best you possibly can, to make sure they're not bottling it up inside them, because that is the worst thing you can do in life, is to bottle up your emotions, because you're only building a fire within yourself that's going to explode someday. One final question here for you, Gill. Name one relationship you'd like to have again, given another chance, and what would you do better this time around?
Oh, that's a good question. There's quite a few, actually, thinking about it. Another relationship. I'd like to have time back with my mum, probably, to realise how much she had been through. I mean, I knew the facts of what she'd been through, but I didn't realise the hurt that had caused. And by the time she was an old lady, and she's now passed, but when she was an old lady, she'd become too ingrained in her way of thinking to kind of see a different way. So she became a very sad, grumpy old woman. And she had reason to be grumpy. But I wonder, knowing what I know now, whether I could have made any difference if I had tackled that when I was 15 or 20 or 25. If I'd been able to listen to her the way I now know is more powerful, rather than as a teenager, oh, Mom, honestly, all of those kind of things, because she didn't have anyone to talk to, and she was always putting her head down and getting on with it. I don't think she dealt with the sadness that she dealt with. She'd suffered illness when I was young. When I was about 10, she'd had meningitis for a year, been in hospital for it had been horrific for her, and she never really spoke about that. So I wish I could have my time over with her again, so that I could be more understanding and be more of a grown-up with her than I had been. I mean, we had a good relationship at the end. We were very close. She lived just around the corner to me, but I still wish I could have helped her a bit more during those years.
I understand that sentiment to some extent there, Gill. And today's conversation has been very interesting. And I've got a couple of takeaways for the audience. And the first one is, I think that when you take the plunge from employment into self-employment, you're entering a world that's unknown. And sometimes you have to take the rough with the smooth. And to use your own experience there, Jill, where you had fire in an adjoining unit to your stationery shop, and then all your stationery was destroyed as a result. You have to take the rough with the smooth. But what you decided was, alongside your husband, was you cut back on the luxuries and you paid your way back into life and paid off all your debts. And that's a very admirable way to look at life. Secondly, you said to your daughters, we'd like you to go to college, but you didn't insist. And I think that's the right way to look at life. Create a wish for people to better themselves, but don't insist that they should do it your way. Let them find their own voice in life and find their own way in life. So be an advisor, but don't insist that people should actually follow your advice religiously or rigidly. And thirdly, just highlighting the example there of your friend and her son when he was knocked down and killed crossing the road, what you're very good there at is being able to empathize with people and build relationships with people, and to listen actively to those people and not to judge those people. I think that's a great life skill to learn for anybody, is listen actively, don't judge people. So on that note, I'll bring today's conversation to a close. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you so much, John. It's been delightful talking to you. Thank you for your time.
Well, so my dad, he grew up in Marino, and he really wanted a daughter. And they had 3 boys, boom, boom, boom. They moved to America, and my mom has me, and she was very fond of telling people, because I was the first granddaughter, there were tons of boys in the Kellys and the Burns, and she was very fond of telling people that I was her gift from Uncle Sam. I always thought that was a little awkward, but interesting when I go to Ireland, I'm the Yank when I talk to my cousins and my friends, but when I'm here, everybody thinks, oh, she's the Irish girl, and it's a great compliment, and I'm thrilled.